Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About It. This is Taylor, your host, and today I'm so excited for what we're going to talk about. We're getting back into sexual health. We are getting into vaginas and vulvas. Yes. And my guest today is Vanessa of Vagesteem on Instagram. Thank you so much for coming on the pod today.
Hey, I'm so excited.
Yeah, same. So you are a life-affirming sexual health educator, trainer, and coach. You come from a Haitian background. You use humor in your trainings. I'm so fascinated with you, and I'm so happy that I found you. Just to kind of start off a bit, was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about what got you into this field in the first place.
Sure. Wow. Be prepared for a really long answer.
Amazing.
Hey, everyone. Taylor, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be on your amazing podcast. I've seen all the amazing work that you're doing, and thank you for elevating, all of these conversations. So Thanks again. So to the folks out there, I'm Vanessa. I'm founder and creator of Vagesteem, which is a podcast and a workshop series. And I like to say that my journey started just from my background and from school. So like Taylor said, I am the child of two Haitian immigrants, and I grew up Catholic. And with that full identity, that means there was no talking about sex in my household. There was none of that going on. And so I went to Catholic school starting third grade all up until 12th grade. And I like to think that the culmination of those experiences brought me to the field. And so one of my memories, the biggest, I feel, shift and turnaround for me was in 12th grade, we have this class called morality. And in morality class, a quote unquote nurse, only Taylor could see me, I'm making air quotes, came in and she was like, hey, y'all, so listen, before you go to college, here's some things you need to know. Couples who use condoms will break up within 4 to 5 years. Condoms don't work. Couples that use birth control will break up within 4 to 5 years. For some reason, all of her stats had 4 to 5 years attached, right? And me being the scholar that I was, I was sitting in the front, taking my pen and paper, and I was like, bet, good to know. Thank you for this wonderful information. After years and years, right, of never having sex ed. So, I knew nothing. I just knew, boom, this is what we have to do. Yeah. And so I get to college, freshman year, I'm walking across the quad, and I'm talking to a friend, now husband, and I was like, listen, when I have sex, I'm never using condoms. When I have sex, I'm never using birth control because I don't want to break up with my boo. And, I'm going on and on. And he's like, oh my God, who hurt you? Where did you, where did you
How did we get here?
Right. And he was just, the look on his face is what kind of I was like, what are you talking about? And this is when I knew that this knowledge was not universal. And so from that day forward, literally after he was like, there's pregnancy out here and there's HIV and stuff and you gotta protect yourself. What are you talking about? Protection, STD, none of this stuff was ever a part of my vocabulary or my world. And so it just really propelled me into just getting all the information that I could. And I joined all these campus groups, and I just started educating people on my campus about staying safe and healthy and having safe sex and giving out, doing condom crawls at bars. And it really propelled me because when I think of, we went to, so one of the things that me and my student group did, I created this thing called Cookies and Condoms. And so we bake cookies on a Friday or Saturday night, and then we would put them in baggies and hand them out to people who are coming in and out of bars with condoms attached to them.
Oh my God, you're making me want to go back to college. Can we do this group today? That's amazing.
I'm into the guerrilla marketing stuff, so I literally hit the streets, and it really, in hindsight, got me thinking I was robbed of something, right? I was robbed of education and knowledge, and I feel being robbed of that shows up for people in many different ways. For me, it was, I felt fear all throughout. So I didn't really experiment. I didn't really try. I didn't really ask questions because I was so fearful, because I just knew, like, you have sex, pregnant, or condoms don't work. And then for other people, it can lead them down the path of, girl, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm busting it wide open all over the place, and still not knowledgeable of the tools that you need to engage in safe and healthy and pleasurable behaviors. And so I think literally from that day forward, and my commitment to myself throughout my career is, I don't want another generation growing up without these tools. I don't want other people out here. And I know that other adults are just like me in how we grew up and not really having this information. So thanks, Catholic school.
Yes.
Catholic school is what got, to answer your question, long story short, Catholic school is what got me. Being a Haitian child is what got me in this field.
Amazing. And so you've been in this field now for over 10 years, teaching and empowering folks. And in 2013 was when you coined Vagesteem. Can you share a little bit about what Vagesteem is, what that means? I'm so on board with this.
Absolutely. So all throughout, like, my work, I've been, just trying to be in positions and find ways to basically be in the sexuality field. And so in 2013, while working, I worked at a clinic, and what I noticed was that I just noticed that, like, the people in the neighborhood weren't really coming to the clinic, and I was like, what the heck is this all about? Like, do they even know that we're here? Do they know the services that we offer? So again, like I did in college, I hit the street. I went to go talk to all the businesses and basically try to find out, like, hey, y'all, do you know we're here? We offer services, and folks had their own preconceived notions. And so I was like, all right, how about we do this? How about I come into around where I worked, there was a lot of barbershops and hair salons. And so I was like, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come bring the message to the people. And while people are getting their hair done, getting your shape up, I'm going to do education right there on the spot. Very nerve-wracking. I clearly love doing nerve-wracking things. But it was, and it still is a way that, and I still do it, it's still a way for me to bring messages to people in non-traditional settings. And so what I noticed was, barbershops were like, can you come and do it right now? Like, that's dope. Like, come and talk about whatever you need to talk about, hand out as many condoms. But the beauty salons weren't really jumping in. And I noticed there was this weird, why do you want to talk about this here? And so what I started to realize was, and what started formulating in my mind, I was like, where do women go as a safe space to just let their hair down, literally, and to talk and just learn and share experiences? And when I started getting this negative kind of reaction to bringing these sexual health conversations to beauty salons, I was like, okay, you know what? I need to do something. I know that there are so many adult women who never got the tools and are still probably walking around without the tools. Let me do something. So basically what I did was open up my house and have my homegirls come over. They brought their homegirls. We'd get some Trader Joe's snacks. And, we just talk about everything from Vag 101, which is one of my signature workshops, to orgasms, to relationships, to whatever. And so in the course of doing that, the workshop started to outgrow my house. So I would have people in my house till 2 o'clock in the morning. Strangers would be in my house. And, so I was like, okay. Yeah. All right. I gotta find another space to host this. And so one of the workshops that we did was around trying to, how do we build a confidence in our vaginas and of our vulvas? And I was like, okay, what am I going to call this workshop today? I can't just call it confidence in your vag.
Yeah.
What can I do?
Love your vajayjay.
Right. Viva la Vulva was already taken and stuff. So I was like, you know what can I call this? And what is very specific to what I'm talking about? And so that's where essentially after that workshop and during that workshop, Vagesteem was coined. And so I like to say that Vagesteem is basically building the literal esteem of your vagina and vulva. And I do believe that this esteem encourages you to, take care of your vagina and vulva, look at your vagina and vulva, embrace it, and bring pleasure to it. And so that's basically been the basis for everything that I do, just encouraging folks to just love up on themselves, love up on their bodies. And typically folks are like, well, who is this for? Is this for this is for cisgender women? And the way that I answer that is, if you have a vagina, I want you to be up in the building. If you want to learn how to love up on your vagina a little bit more, I don't care who you are. Come on, let's have this conversation, and let's have the tool. So that's where Vagesteem.
Vagesteem. Yeah, no, and I think that, I'll kind of expand this out instead of just saying women here, but people, vulva owners, people with vulvas. Yeah. I think there's often this sense of almost disgust of ewy, ew. I've had friends where I talk about this stuff and they're just like, oh God, no, I don't want to see that. There's an account that I follow on Instagram, the Vulva Gallery, and it's just all these different pictures and drawings really of vulvas. Yes. And I'm like, this account is so empowering and so valuable. And for some of my friends, even just looking at it, they're like, ew, I don't want to see that. That's gross. And I'm like, girl, that's your vulva. No, you gotta be that's a part of you. You gotta build her up. Don't talk down to her like that.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up the Vulva Gallery, because it's important. That's the number one thing that I have in all of my Vagesteem workshops: images. Because folks don't see themselves. A lot of times, folks with vaginas, they're not really looking, and the way that our anatomy is set up, you kind of have to be in a position. You
got to get a mirror. You got to get all the way up in there. I have 2 metal rods in my spine from my neck down to my butt. So I can't even, I always warn people I am with intimately beforehand. I'm just so you know, I try my best, but there's probably some patches down there. I don't really know. I do my best. And I like to have some hair there anyway, but I'm you really got it. You got to get prepared to put in some effort to really examine and get in there and start building that relationship with your vulva.
That's right. And the thing is, it's I am so happy you brought up these reactions, because that is so true. It sounds ridiculous. And whenever I talk to, people with penises, and they're like, what are you talking about? That's absurd. How can you go your whole life without looking? It's a lot of people's realities, and the messages that we receive, the things that we're told, even when I'm teaching, I teach across a lifespan, and the most visceral reactions come from kids in 5th and 6th grade. And whenever I'm like, y'all got to look at it, even then at that young age, you're like, that's God. And I'm like, look, I didn't ask you to look at somebody else's. I said, look at your own. Yeah. Be familiar. But there's clearly, even at 10 years old, you've already formulated this thing in your brain about this part being disgusting, this part being a place that smells like fish. That's always the thing that comes up. I don't want to look at it. It's ugly and it smells like fish. And I always got to turn around and be like, have y'all ever seen balls in your life? Them things are discolored. Them things are lopsided.
Have
you seen a penis? It is two-tone. I don't know about white penises, but for Black men, that thing is two-toned. Y'all, stop talking to me about. Stop talking to me about what's ewy. Have you smelled balls? They're not that great. Have you? Get out of here. And so it's only this one-sided, just this very one-sided argument about what, about our body parts. And I'm like, how is one so great over the other when, both of them are here for, all of their reasons. Yeah. But I feel like we have industries that feed into, people who, the products that are telling you to smell a certain way, douching, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole industry telling you to be insecure or for you to build insecurity, whereas folks with penises don't have that. There's not a mainstream ball wash. There's no hey, this masculine hygiene. I don't know why just feminine hygiene, and so
freshen up the balls.
That perpetuates this ongoing cycle of us really being disconnected from our bodies. And appreciate you bringing that up because it really shows the reason why, I created Vagesteem, so that we can be more connected to those parts in our body.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, in a way, all of these messages, not only for like, perpetuating our economy, right, and feeding into these marketing dollars, but it also acts to suppress female sexuality or vulva owner sexuality, where I think in our patriarchal society that an empowered woman in her sexuality is very intimidating. And then I think that really throws off the dynamics between, cisgender, heterosexual standpoint here, throws off some of that dynamic of power and throws off like the just the way in which our society typically tries to put men and women into these boxes sexually.
You ain't lying. You are not lying.
Thank you. Yes. And I'm wondering, like, if you can talk a little bit here about, like, how you kind of start to walk people through that a bit. I mean, I know you have your workshops and then you also do the podcast as well, but what kind of is maybe some of the steps involved in this work to help vulva owners get more intimate and, positively associated with their vulvas?
Yeah. Oh, my God. This is... y'all, Taylor didn't tell me that we were about to be like on Oprah's couch right now. Just, ask me them good questions. So I like to tackle this a few ways, right? So for the folks that listen to my podcast, every single guest that I have on there, the last question I ask them, if they have a vagina, I ask them, how do you build your Vagesteem, right? And so there's like 20 million ways that, the folks on the show discuss their pathway. But when I think about how I start to begin this work, for me, one, it's those pictures and the awareness. Right.
Yeah.
I feel like so many times, no matter if I'm doing a home workshop or I'm doing a conference, folks walking in and just seeing images, you always have like a group of folks who are like, oh my God, girl, that's what mine looks like, or like, oh, I didn't even know it looked like that, or some people who are like, oh my God, I didn't even know like other people's lips hung down like that. I always thought something was wrong with me. So in reality, having folks see themselves is so important, which is why, one, it takes forever for me to find these images and pictures because, especially as folks of color, we don't really have too many, like, non-pornographic images for some reason. Like, you'll type in, like, black vaginas, and it's just like, put it in my pussy. I'm like, okay, guys, I just want a simple, just simple pictures. But I think building the awareness of our body parts, two, knowing what those body parts do. For so long, and I know that's very basic, but anytime I do like my Vag 101 workshop, people are like, wait, it's supposed to smell like what? Oh my God, wait, the hair is supposed to grow like that. Those just minute level detail things that we don't really think about, but are so integral in having us understand our bodies, the functioning. And I like to have folks call out what those parts are. So the first thing anybody will realize is that I'll talk about how, like, what it was called for me growing up, which was bubun. And I don't know when I learned vagina and vulva, but, like, sometimes our associations are so deep, and sometimes those associations, and I have folks think about, what were your first associations? Was it negative? Was it positive? Were you connected to it? Was it an empowering person being like, look at this? Like, this is like, look at it.
Now I'm thinking about mine, and I'm like, my mama, my grandma, she would just say, like, your pee-pee. And the only thing I remember, it was like, I like a pee-pee, and like boys had wee-wees. And it was like to make sure that I don't wear my bathing suit on like too long after it's been wet, because then my pee-pee will get irritated. And now like I don't think I actually learned vulva as the correct term for like my outer quote, vagina until like a few years ago. And now I have I call them like my chosen family. She's basically like my little sister. She's 5 years old now, and we were playing the other day and the ball kind of like came up and hit me in my vulva. And she was like, oh, it hit your vagina. And I was like, well, yeah, my vulva. And then she's like, yeah, how come we don't have penises? And I was like, well, because some people are born with vulvas and vaginas and others are born with penises. And she's like, oh, yeah, it was your vulva. And I was like, yeah, like the inner part is your vagina. And so we were having these conversations and I was like, wow, she's 5 years old and she's going to grow up knowing that like this is her vulva and like we're going to have so many great conversations about it so that hopefully she does have a positive association. But mine was like, it's my pee-pee and like make sure it doesn't stink.
Right. That's the number one thing. Like, make sure that thing don't smell. All right, like, y'all, like, there's just so much. I feel like there's just so much to know. But like, the thing is that a lot of how we were brought up with our bodies really makes a difference in how we, carry this out. And so for me, for some of the work that I do, it's like undoing some of that stuff. Like if you were taught that it was smelly and hairy and never to look at it, and you're not supposed to touch it, because I feel like that's the message that a lot of times we get, or you're penalized or punished for touching it, or not even knowing that it brings you pleasure. I think that's one of the things that we spend time doing in the workshops to kind of like dig down deep and start unraveling that stuff. And I always tell my participants, it's about rewriting or undoing that shame that we learned, because I feel like there's a lot of shame in our bodies. And so we kind of have to do this work of liberating ourselves, liberating our thoughts, because a lot of times the things that we're taught, and I feel like we do this stuff every day, all the time, especially if you're on a path to being better. I oftentimes ask myself, okay, if I'm having a negative reaction to something, why is that? Or like, if something's like making me weird, like feel weird, like why is that? And so I think it's the same work that we have to do when it comes to building our Vagesteem and growing in that path.
Yeah. No, I love that. The unlearning is a huge, huge part. And then you were also saying like naming it and knowing the purpose of it, like what it does. And I think that's been a huge part for me in feeling empowered in my pubic hair, is understanding that like it helps, with lubrication, it helps with more arousal because it's like, the nerves that are in the hairs. And so now like when I explain it or when I share it with people, I'm like, well, like it helps with my lubrication and it helps like things feel a lot better. So I'm increasing my pleasure by having my pubic hair there. And it's there to like protect my vulva too. So like, why would I not have some there? Like it knowing the functions that it serves has helped empower me in my own Vagesteem.
There you go.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been, I mean, I now I feel like I need to take your whole workshop. But one of the things that I've seen just kind of on your page, and part of what you talked about in the beginning too, is like using humor when you teach about sex. Like, as you said, there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of unlearning to do. Like, people feel pretty uncomfortable talking about this kind of stuff in general. You had posted for Father's Day a photo of Lawrence from Insecure, and I was like, oh my gosh, there she is. Yes. And for those of you that have never seen Insecure, highly, highly recommend watching it. There's been 4 seasons. Issa Rae is fantastic. I love the show. And on your website, you also have a whole section about like the hoetation, which I want to make sure we talk about too. But first, can we touch on this humor part first, and kind of why you use it and how you use it? I mean, I've already kind of seen how you use it, but
So I appreciate, you see, I love when people see what I'm doing behind the scenes.
Yes, I do my stalking. But
I love being funny, being humorous has always been like a part of my personality, and just being loud, exuberant, and fun has always been a part of my personality. And I feel like it's a huge part of just, if we're talking about like branding, it's just literally myself just showing up in how I do education. And so for me, and like Taylor's saying, when you look at my page, you'll notice I try to use a lot of like pop culture references, just because sometimes like I feel like as a sexual health educator, a lot of what we're told and a lot of how we're taught is to like prevention and like, you need to stop doing the thing and I'm the expert in the room. And sometimes folks can't always make the connections. And I think about that when I think about things like, consent, and when I think about teaching things like STDs, a lot of times the things that we teach people are not pertinent or relevant, and or we don't know how to have people apply them to our real lives. And so that's where I feel like my personality, and that's where I feel like the humor comes in to really help folks hone in on, like, it does not have to be this one scary thing to talk about these topics. It doesn't have to be this like rigid, like scary, accusatory thing, especially if we're applying it to something like consent. And for me, I feel like we do a disservice, and we tell folks things like, you need to just ask people for consent. Well, where they do that at? Like, they don't, like, no one does that. Never in our interactions has anyone ever been like, hello, would you like to have the sex? Hello. Would you like to do this thing? Like, we just don't.
I'm dying right now because I do that sometimes where I'm like, I think I want to have sex with you.
But like your average everyday person, like, we use very nuanced language in the way that we talk, right? We say things like, hey, I was wondering if you were like, down to come over later. What's up with it? We know what "what's up with it" means, but like, that's not a traditional textbook, like, this is the way you ask for consent type of way that we speak. And so you take this very rigid way of doing things, and then you want folks to apply to their everyday lives, and then wonder why, like, folks can't get it right. Well, we need to bridge this gap between, like, basically what's happening in real life and the idealism that we have when we're educators. And so for me, it's about tying those two things together and really just trying to bring people in. For me, it's about bringing people in. And like I said, we're having courageous conversations. So it's already hard enough to do that without all of that pressure of like, am I doing this right? So yes, come over and find some funnies.
Yes. Yes. And so part of what I'm hearing then that I wasn't really expecting, but that I love about this piece is that the humor for you is also just a part of you showing up authentically as an educator, as a trainer. And I think that bridging that, like, one of the reasons I love having experts and professionals on here to also talk about their own personal journeys in life is to like help humanize the professionals. So I think that part is really cool, that's just a part of you showing up authentically. And I'm curious just kind of how your identity, not only from a humor perspective, but from being Haitian and having this background with being Catholic and whatever else, just how your identity informs the work that you do.
I'm telling you, y'all, this is the best interview I ever had. They was out here just asking questions for real, like, you see me? Authentic. I'm gonna write that somewhere. I like that. I like to, I really like this question, and I think that for me, all of these identities play into everything that I do, right? It kind of centers me and kind of grounds me and roots me in why I keep doing the work, why these conversations are important. And I think that it also, I'm very, I don't hide the fact that these are my identities, right? And so I tell people all the time, like, I'm Catholic. I may not be practicing as much right now, but, I still go to church and I pray and I still engage in spiritual practice, and I'm still very much so connected to my parents, and I always classify myself as an immigrant child because I think that it helps folks be connected more to the message, right? And so knowing that I did have this conservative upbringing and we can still have fun and bring up these conversations. And I think when, you know, folks who are battling with like how God shows up for them in their sexual relationship, and there's a lot of push and pull that comes with that folks are still trying to come to terms with. And so I think when they see and hear like, oh, wow, like you were rooted in these traditions and you, you know, do all of these things and like you're still able to like walk comfortably in your skin. And so I think all of those things help people see themselves, identify. And even if I'm not talking to Haitian people, other people who are child of immigrants are like, oh, girl, I know about that. Yes, I know we weren't talking about that in my household too. And like, you are still able to do the work and still, you're still able to work through shame or messages that you received or the messages that you didn't receive and reclaim that for yourself. And so I like to say that all of those things, like you said, help me be my authentic self in front of folks. And I feel like it also helps in, you know, that connection. I feel like every educator has their lane and who they're talking to. And I feel like for me, it's like I hope these folks who have all of these multifaceted identities can feel feel one with like what I'm saying.
Yeah. Do you feel that you have the type of people that are searching or seeking out your work, is that pretty representative, or does that feel like it's more narrow focused? Is it more like heterosexual, cisgender, you know, white women? Is it, what's kind of like the typical client that you see yourself working with?
Yeah, so typically, and brand research, and just like the folks who show up to my workshop, I have all types of folks show up to my workshop because, again, I like to be very specific in telling folks, like, this is not for cisgender women. This is for folks who have a vagina and want to appreciate their vaginas and learn about them more. And so typically women of color are the folks who are more drawn to my work. Like I have everyone. I have men that, you know, are always writing me DMs and saying, like, this work is so amazing. And like, you're teaching me things I didn't even know, or you're helping me unravel these messages that I received as well. But typically, yes, women of color. And I'm very specific about Black women in particular and women of color being majority of the guests that are on my podcast. So like 98% of guests I have on my podcast are women of color, are Black women, because for me, it's about elevating those stories that we don't get to see in the mainstream. So when we're thinking about things like 50 Shades of Grey, when we're thinking about romance novels, when we're thinking about the things that we see in mainstream sex, we aren't seeing like a jet-setting Jasmine, like I know you had,
Love her.
A couple of weeks ago on your podcast. We don't see these. We don't see ourselves, which is why I feel like we have a lot of learning and undoing to do, because I think for a long time, especially as women of color, we're seen as either being fetishized or tokenized. And a lot of women of color are doing this work as well, but they don't have the clout and the platforms and the reach to be able to get their messages out. So for me, when I really started my podcast, I was very intentional. Like, this is who I want, because I want people to know, like, we are out here doing the work. Like, we are out here talking about sex, and we're having a good ass time, and we have cuddle parties, and we do our own porn, and we, sell toys, like whatever it is. And we do live and have sex and have fun while living with STDs and stuff. But oftentimes when we Google these, and it takes a lot of research for me, because when we're Googling these names, like, oh, I'd love a guest who can talk about X, the number one things that come up even on the search engines are like, oh, this person who ended up in like Teen Vogue, or this person, like, and it's mostly a white woman that, that has the bigger audience and the bigger platform. So for me, it's really about, women of color, Black women especially, seeing themselves in our pleasure and in these sexual conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, like, I get a lot of people that like request to be on the podcast, and so frequently it's white women with their like female empowerment messages. And it's a bit overwhelming sometimes. And I encourage people to, submit to be a guest. And I'm always like open-minded to hearing other people's, experiences in life. But time and time again, every time it's a white woman with this message where I'm like, you're already, first of all, you got the dollars and the support to even have someone out here marketing and doing all this stuff for you.
Okay. Okay.
B, yeah, I totally hear you on that piece of like, 50 Shades of Grey. Like that's white. And even like I have a background from being on The Bachelor, and all of that is white love. It's white romance. Yeah. And like we really don't see like that black romance, that black pleasure that's not fetishized in a mainstream platform.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so funny you say about like who's reaching out, because it was like last year when I had someone reach out and they were like, I love your work. I've been following your work and, all of this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, like I love words of affirmation is my thing.
Same.
So like I'm like, oh my God, that's great. And so, they of course were like, I'd love to be on your podcast and talk about X, Y, and Z. And it was like the way that we were having the conversation that really rubbed me the wrong way, because it's like, wait, if you did actually follow the work, you would see like, and that's not to say, because I've had white women on the podcast, like that's not the issue. It was just more of this like entitled, like I'm bringing this to your audience. Like, girl, I could find somebody else to do this, but it was just like, it was the tone and how this was happening. And so when I like declined, it was like, oh, well, I was bringing this to the audience and you're missing out and do. And it was like, no, if you were a real one, if you were a day one, or if you even just took the time and just scroll, like if you just did one of these moves, which for the people who can't see me, it's taking your phone and just hitting the swipe up button as much as you can, you would notice like, oh, okay, she has an audience that she's talking to. She has an audience that like her message is more skewed towards let me stay in my lane, but it was like the attitude was just out of control. So I feel that, but I also feel like that's layered too. I feel like women of color, we oftentimes have this imposter syndrome around like, do I have enough followers to be seen as a subject matter expert? Do I have enough, clout? Do I have enough experience? Do I have enough education? And that's what I'm constantly affirming people. Like, you are the expert. You have a story to tell. You have an experience that you can pull from. And that's what I tell everybody in my workshops. I always tell people, like, I'm not the only expert in the room. Don't look at me as like, Vanessa, this is a communal thing. This is a community. We each have something we can contribute and share and learn from each other and stories to tell. And this is what this is all about, sharing our stories and ensuring that they're elevated and heard.
Yes.
Yes. Look at us.
I'm feeling empowered. Yes. One thing I want to make sure, there's two things I want to make sure we get to before we have to wrap up.
Sure.
One is being able to have sex positive conversations with family and how you go about doing that. You've shared conversations with your mom, asking about Plan B. And then I do want to get to the hoetation too. So some hoetation questions. But first, kind of navigating, for yourself personally, these conversations about sex with family members when that was not topics you grew up with.
Taylor, the best interview I've ever had in the world. So it's funny. This is funny because I'm constantly thinking about this, right? And for me, when I decided, so in the college and grad school, public health, community health was my thing. Like I've always been into health education. And so, I started off as pre-med. I dropped those classes. And if anybody has immigrant parents in the house, you were destined to be a doctor, lawyer, nurse, or engineer, right? And so within that, it was very hard to like have that conversation with my mom because she did trip and she stopped talking to me for a few months because I was like, I'm just going to drop all of these pre-med classes, and I'm gonna continue on this health education thing I've been doing. And my mom was like, what are you going to tell people you are? You're going to tell people you are public health? You can't tell people you're anything. And so within that, it's been interesting throughout the years, seeing my parents kind of grow and evolve with me, because my parents are my friends on Facebook. So oftentimes
so they're seeing all of it.
I just have to crack up because my dad called me the other day and he's like, are you busy? Are you talking about VJJ stuff? And I'm like, no, Daddy. I'm actually sitting outside. I'm just taking a breath. But it's funny, but it also shows the evolution that I feel that especially children of immigrants, because this is the experience I know the most, they're so hard on us and they're so wrapped up in how we look and how we're perceived, because all they know is they worked hard, they hustled, they got here, and they want their children to be able to take care of themselves and be successful, right?
And like you said too, this kind of imposter syndrome of are you enough in that sense? And being an immigrant, you have to really work to prove yourself.
That is right. Yeah. Yes. And so I think that for me, it's at first my mom was like, why are you talking about this stuff? And so, she wasn't really involved in my work. And at first, I was just kind of this is what I'm doing. She'll see it, whatever. And then one day I just decided to invite her to this training I was doing for parents and teaching them how to talk to their kids about sex. And my mom sat right in the front row. And I didn't know how it was going to go, but I was like, let me open the door to her, because it is important for me, that she at least sees it, right? It's not important that she completely accepts it, but at least she sees and can imagine what I'm doing. And so she sat in the front row, and after the workshop, it was a 3-hour workshop. She was like, oh my God, I didn't even know there were all these things to talk about. I didn't teach all that stuff at all. And I'm like, right, talking about healthy relationships is important. The basic stuff, which is even the stuff that I kind of felt resentment about from not learning at school. Consent. It doesn't have to be about P and V and we're doing it and we're having sex and we're getting pregnant. That's not what this stuff is all about. It's about how we view our bodies, how we view ourselves, how we view ourselves in relationship to other people, relationship abuse. This is the list goes on and on and on about all the things that make up a sexually healthy person. And we just don't talk about it. And so her face was like, oh, man. And so she became, I think, an even better advocate. But I also think it kind of relaxed her, because now she's like, okay, you grown. I don't have to censor myself in having these conversations. And so I say all that to say, for the folks who are kind of struggling with how do you bring things up to your parents, take the pressure off. Take the load off. And I sat in this session, and I'll never forget it. Can't remember the person's name right now, but Fat Sex Therapist on Instagram had this awesome workshop session about coming out. And they said something to the effect of we put so much pressure on ourselves to do this coming out process, and our parents need to be intimately involved in our lives. And they said something along the lines of this very European, it's very white, it's very Western to be I just need all of this stuff, and you need to be intimately raveled in my life, and all of these things. And the point, the greater point was the way that we grew up, our parents weren't like that, right? Your parents don't need to know every single intimate detail, just they never included you in every intimate detail. Yes, there are problems there are issues there we can always navigate. But for me, once I heard that, it kind of took this load off around seeking validation and approval for everything that I was doing, because my parents were already proud. My parents were already just satisfied with can you eat? Yes, you can. Okay, cool. I don't know what you're doing over there, girl, but I support it. But now to, include my parents on my terms, and then to watch them get more comfortable. My mom called me, like you said, and was asking me about Plan B, because I'm giving out Plan B during the quarantine right now because folks are still doing it. But to know, she was like, what is that? I've never heard of that before. Explain it to me. And then to have her talk about like she's like, if you gave out vibrators, like this would keep people from trying to have sex during the quarantine, stuff like that. And so it's mind blowing to hear her say these things, but like, I think it's by me being my authentic self, she's able to feel more comfortable in knowing that I'm confident, and she can also have a safe space to ask questions as well.
Yeah. I love that.
Load off, y'all.
Relieving yourself of some of that pressure. And also it sounds like it's a great benefit of when your family does become open to hearing those conversations and allows themselves to kind of be the student in the relationship as well, and be open to their child's influence. I know that can be a difficult place for parents to kind of transition into, but I think it's definitely worth it for all parents.
Definitely.
And just talking about like questions, how to ask the right questions. The last point I want to make sure we touch on is the hoetation. And I mean, in quarantine, my hoetation is gone down, like way, 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 way down. It's about to change a little bit later today. Later today, it's going to change a little bit for the rest of the week. But having a little visitor, but yeah, it's the hoetation. It's when it's going, it's great. And, but to even get it going in a good spot, you have to have these conversations. And
for sure,
part of what you do in your workshops is kind of help teach people how to stay safe throughout their hoetation. And again, hoetation is a term from Insecure. So again, if you're like, what is she talking about? You got to go watch Insecure. But yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I can think like to my own kind of examples as to how I've had these conversations and how to do things like bring up testing and bring up, condom usage and what I'm comfortable with and boundaries. Right. And I'm curious, I imagine humor is a part of it, but how you kind of help walk people through to be able to stay safe in their hoetation.
Definitely. So for me, I think the number one thing that I like to impart on people is, there's folks in workshops that say like, don't yuck anyone's yum. And I think that's like the basis. Like, I don't care what you're doing out in these streets, as long as you have consent and as long as you're, not hurting any elderly children or animals. Like, that's it.
Yep.
So anything you do is on you. And I think a lot of times the way that we talk about staying safe and the way we talk about STDs is very, again, rooted in this, like, you shouldn't, and ew, and ewy STDs. And the number one thing I like to draw folks' attention to when I teach about STDs, never have any pictures, because scare tactics don't work on people. And then pictures also don't really get to the reality of the situation, which is a lot of folks who have STDs or STIs are asymptomatic. So you sitting here looking for, this big glob of whatever is happening is most likely not going to happen. And so a lot of things that I feel like traditionally we're taught, like show the pictures to like have the shock effect, it, one, may not work on folks. And we know that scare tactics don't necessarily work for folks. But two, it doesn't really get at, hey, you might in your life know, love, date, or have an STI or STD yourself. What's the point in being judgmental towards that? What's the point in being ashamed of that when this is literally the reality of the world and the statistics that we have out here? So instead of shying away from that or trying to do the X, like get away from me, it's more so about how do we put ourselves in the mindset to feel comfortable, to have the language to bring up, one, using condoms, because it's one thing, like we do traditional sex education will say, use condoms every time. If it was that easy, people would have done it. We are not really assessing and we're not really getting down to the root of, we are dealing with a society that still looks down on people, mostly women who carry condoms. We are a society that still wants to call people hoe and sluts for carrying condoms and taking care of themselves. We call people hoe, slut, thot, whatever, if they are empowered in their sexuality and want to bust it down every once in a while. Like, it is.
Yep. But that's why we reclaim that word and we say, this is my hoetation.
That is right. That is right. And so we still have all of these labels that we need to empower people to navigate in order to get down to the root of why you can't ask someone to use condoms, and then giving them the language, because it's not just use it, it's let's role play to figure out how you can feel more comfortable bringing this up. Or, okay, let's work through your journey of building up that strength and building up those assertive communication skills so that you're able to ask partners, when was the last time they got tested, asking partners to come get tested with you, making someone show you their papers, whatever it is. It's not just about like knowing to do it, because a lot of people know to do it. It's, do I know how, and can I do it without feeling like I'm doing too much? Because I feel like oftentimes as women, we're like, oh, I don't want to be seen as a bitch. I don't want to be seen as like a this or that, or like, my favorite, and it doesn't matter what race, ethnicity, age you are, it's always, I don't want them to think like I'm, being mean. We have this thing with like being mean that to the point, to our own danger, to our own detriment, to a fault, because we're so caught up in other people's perception of us that we're willing to take disrespect. And something that I always tell all my students is, there's no more niceness on the table if your boundaries and your wants are being violated. There's no more niceness on the table when someone is telling you why they can't, quote unquote, can't use condoms or refuse to use condoms. So we need to get out of this niceness. And I'm always telling folks, like, F nice, get out of nice, respectful. Can I be cordial? Like, these are other attributes that we need to look towards rather than this like nice stuff, because nice stuff will get us caught out there in a whole bunch of situations that we never intended to be in or want to be in. Because this is what we're taught. And so it's all taught. And this is not blaming anyone. It's literally the work that we have to do in undoing the stuff that we learned, that we learned all of our lives and we're still learning. I think a big part of being safe in the hoetation is being able to communicate, have all your paraphernalia, which I got. You got your internal female kind, you got your dental dams, you got all your stuff. But it's being prepared, and it's being able to say, like, this is what I need and this is what I want, and getting yours too. So
prioritizing pleasure and respect over being nice and pleasing others to disservice yourself.
Listen, so that is basically it when it comes to the hoetation. You got to be prepared. You got to speak up.
Yes, I love it. I want to keep talking to you like forever, because you've been so absolutely amazing. You have some workshops. We've talked about the podcast. Can you kind of share a bit of where people can best find you, if there's a specific podcast episode that you want to direct people towards, and then maybe your workshops as well? Yeah.
So again, thank you so much. I just spent the whole day talking to you too, because you got some.
I know. I'm like, I don't want to end this. I'm like, I don't want to hop on this next call.
I have to like rewrite my bio with all the amazing things that you like told me today, and like I'm going to start using all the stuff that you taught me. But it was an honor and a pleasure to be on your podcast today. Thank you so much for having me. And so for the folks who want to find me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at VagEssteem. That's VAGESTEEM. And I can be found on any of those platforms. You can email me at vagesteem@gmail.com. A couple of upcoming workshops that I have one coming up this Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where it's more catered towards folks who teach sex ed or will be teaching sex ed, health teachers, counselors who are afraid of being life-affirming in their authentic selves in the classroom due to district policies or due to due to not wanting parents to be called. So the name of the workshop, the name of the webinar is called it's called How to Teach Sex Ed Without Getting Fired. And it's so important for me to ensure that we have a generation of educators who are not afraid to give they're not afraid to give their students the tools that they need. And then coming up in the summertime, I am going to be doing Vag 101 online. So look out for that. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that. What was the other question you asked me?
Podcast.
I love Cash. So I'm on Venmo and CashApp as Vagesteem as well. And then you can listen to the podcast at Vagesteem.com, or you can listen to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. So Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, it's all on there. Everything's under Vagesteem.
Vagesteem. Thank you. That was so amazing. I super, super appreciate you taking the time to come on and share. And all of the resources, too, that you just mentioned will be listed in the episode notes. Everyone can be sure to go and check them out. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for sharing all of your wisdom and experiences with us today.
Thank you so much. You really made my day. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to talk with you again. I hope to cross paths.
Yes, definitely. All right, that does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for making it all the way through and keeping your ears, your hearts, and your minds open. It would mean so much to me if you could take a second or two after listening to this episode to leave a review on iTunes and let me know what you're enjoying about the show. I love reading, what your favorite episodes are, where you guys listen, and definitely feel free to share this with a friend. I mean, part of how we break down the stigmas around these topics is by talking about them, right? And sharing them with more people. So definitely share the podcast. And again, really wanting to include all of you in this podcast. So if you have questions or you want to share a thought or an experience, please send in a voice memo to ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And I'm really excited to keep having these conversations and breaking down these stigmas. So thank you all so, so, so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next time.